I wasn't there the night my wife died, and I almost missed my daughter's entire life. That was how Paul began his speech. No business titles, no success stories, just silence, followed by truth. The microphone crackled slightly, but no one dared to move. A room full of executives, donors, fathers, mothers, all frozen, hanging on that first sentence. He adjusted his tie slowly, not out of nervousness, but the weight of what he was about to share. This wasn't a keynote presentation. This was a confession. Some of you know me as a CEO. I've built companies, closed international deals, flown more miles than I can count, but none of that prepared me for standing beside a hospital bed and realizing I'd failed where it mattered most, at home. He paused, scanning the crowd, not for approval, but connection. I thought I was doing everything right, providing, protecting, planning ahead, until the day I got a call, 8 hours into a conference in London, telling me my wife was gone, and my daughter was alone. There were no visuals, no charts behind him. Just a still image, his family photo from 3 years ago, Paul in a tuxedo, his wife Monique, glowing in emerald green, and their daughter Samantha between them, holding both their hands. It felt like it had been taken in another lifetime. I'm not here to preach. I'm here to talk to every father who's ever said next week, every husband who missed dinner, for just one more meeting, every child who waited by the window, wondering if Dad would show. He looked down for a second, and his voice dipped. Because that was me, and that was my daughter. If you've ever lost someone, or wished you showed up sooner, like, comment, and share this video, so others don't make the same mistake. The sky had opened that morning. Not in a storm, but a soft, steady drizzle. Raindrops tapped the earth like quiet footsteps, falling on black umbrellas and bowed heads. Paul stood still, soaked and bareheaded, his umbrella forgotten in the grass. It didn't matter. His suit was drenched. His soul felt worse. Across from him, a polished mahogany casket rested above the open grave, blanketed with white lilies. Monique's favorite. Mourners filled the cemetery, her family, her neighbors from church. Even some of Paul's colleagues who had flown in out of respect. But the only face Paul could focus on was Samantha's. She stood to the side, clutching a framed photo of her mother. Her lips trembled, and her black dress clung to her arms in the rain. Just a week ago, she had graduated high school in that same framed smile. Now she stood at her mother's burial, a black veil replacing the graduation cap. Paul wanted to hold her, but he hesitated, unsure if she would let him. The minister's voice echoed through the rain, low and warm. He spoke of Monique's kindness, her love for family, her service to the community. Paul couldn't hear all of it. His thoughts were stuck in rewind, remembering the flight delay, the frantic taxi, ride from the airport, the hospital room already cleared out when he arrived. Monique had slipped away without him. It haunted him. She was alone, he thought. I wasn't there. Samantha was... He blinked hard, trying to push the thought away. Water rolled down his cheeks, rain or tears. It didn't matter. Samantha dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief Monique's sister had handed her. Her shoulders were stiff. Paul recognized that stiffness. It wasn't just grief. It was the kind of stillness you hold when you don't know if the person next to you is safe to lean on. He stepped closer, gently placed his arm around her. She didn't flinch, but she didn't lean in either. Still, he kept his arm there. It was something. After the final prayer, people stepped forward one by one, laying flowers on the casket, whispering their goodbyes. Monique's mother, Grandma Yvette, approached Paul and held both his hands in hers. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. She loved you, Yvette said, voice breaking. She always believed in your heart, Paul, even when your head was somewhere else. Please, take care of Samantha. She's going to need you now. Paul nodded slowly, unable to answer. His throat was a knot of shame and sorrow. He had never wanted to fail as a father. But he knew now that presence couldn't be measured in dollars or square footage. It was measured in the moments you actually show up. His daughter had grown up with too few of those moments. Behind him, the casket began to lower. The crowd stepped back. The sound of rope and creaking wood was the only thing that filled the silence. Paul looked down. This isn't just a burial, he thought. It's the end of everything I thought I was doing right. As the grave swallowed the coffin, he whispered inwardly, "I'm sorry, Monique." After the crowd dispersed, Samantha stood alone at the edge, staring down. Paul watched her from a distance. She held the photo tighter than ever. In it, Monique was laughing, mouth wide open, head tilted back, the kind of joy that made people fall in love. Paul walked up beside her, slowly. "She would have loved all the flowers," he said softly. Samantha didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, she always did. It wasn't much, but it wasn't nothing. Paul took a deep breath. "Sam." She turned, meeting his eyes, her mother's eyes, same shape, same quiet strength. "I know I've missed a lot," he said, "and I can't undo any of it. But I want to do better. I need to, for her, and for you." Samantha looked at him for a long moment. Her expression is unreadable. "We'll see," she replied, barely above a whisper. She turned and began walking toward the car. Paul stayed behind, looking up at the grey sky, water dripping from his chin. The clouds didn't clear. The sun didn't break through, but for the first time in a long time, he had said something true, and said it out loud. Now he just had to live it. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow, the kind of silence that followed absence. Not from someone being out for a while, but from someone never coming back. The kitchen, once filled with laughter and music, now held only the low hum of the refrigerator and the creak of floorboards. Monique used to fill this space, humming gospel while flipping pancakes, arguing with Samantha over which station to play on Sunday mornings, swaying gently as she cooked. Now, the air hung still. Paul stood by the counter, holding a coffee mug, full but untouched. The clock read 8:17 a.m. Monique would have been braiding Samantha's hair by now. She always made time, even when running late. Paul stared at the calendar on the fridge. The red circle was still there. Samantha's graduation, just 10 days ago. The marker hadn't been wiped away. Upstairs, he could hear the muffled sound of a TV playing. Samantha had taken to falling asleep on the couch in the guest room, the one Monique decorated with warm colors and old quilts. Sometimes she stayed there all night. Sometimes she returned to her bed at dawn. Either way, she barely spoke. Paul had tried knocking a few times. "Need anything?" "I'm okay." That was the routine. 3 words. Always the same. He didn't push. He didn't know how. He walked past the living room. One of Monique's shawls was folded neatly on the armrest. Samantha had probably used it. A sitcom was playing softly, a rerun Monique used to love. Samantha wasn't watching, just staring, wrapped in silence, face blank. Paul stood in the doorway. "I was thinking of going by your grandma's house later," he offered. "She said she's sorting through some of your mom's old things. You could come, if you want." Samantha didn't look at him. Maybe. She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either. Paul nodded and backed away. "Let me know if you change your mind." Later that night, Paul sat in the dark of his study. He hadn't turned on the lamp. Just the soft light from the hallway poured in. On his desk sat a stack of unopened mail, a pair of cufflinks, and his wedding ring, which he hadn't worn since the funeral. His hand kept reaching for it out of habit, only to touch bare skin. He opened his laptop, staring at a blank document. The cursor blinked. He thought about the last time he had taken Samantha to a recital, 3rd grade violin, off-key but full of pride. Monique had recorded the entire thing on her phone. Paul had watched it later. On a plane, he'd missed the actual performance for a board meeting in Chicago. He thought about birthdays. He remembered balloons, but couldn't remember which ones he'd been there for and which ones Monique had carried alone. The worst part wasn't forgetting the moments. It was realizing how many of them he never witnessed in the first place. He clicked open a photo folder on his desktop, one labeled Family. Most of the pictures were of Monique and Samantha. Beach trips, museum, lazy Saturday mornings in pajamas. In nearly all of them, Paul was behind the camera. or absent entirely. He closed the laptop. The next morning, he made breakfast. Eggs, burnt toast, over-salted sausage. Samantha came downstairs, hair unbrushed, wearing a hoodie. She paused in the kitchen doorway, clearly surprised. "You cooked?" Paul tried not to smile. "Tried." Samantha walked over, picked up a plate, took one bite, then raised an eyebrow. "You used salt, right?" He laughed once, a tired, real laugh. A little too much, apparently. She sat down anyway, ate in silence. It was the first breakfast they'd shared at the table in weeks. Midway through the meal, Paul cleared his throat. "I was thinking, maybe we could go out somewhere this weekend. Just us. Doesn't have to be fancy. Just time together." Samantha didn't answer immediately. She focused on her eggs. Then, softly, "Why now?" Paul set his fork down. "Because I should have done it a long time ago, and I don't want to waste what's left." He didn't try to explain more than that. He couldn't undo the past. He just hoped she'd give him a sliver of the future. She gave a small nod. "Okay, not much, but it was something." The wind whispered through the trees that evening as Paul sat on the back porch, a blanket over his legs and Monique's old mug in his hands. The tea inside had gone cold, but he wasn't drinking it anyway. His phone rested on the table beside him, paused at a specific moment in a video. The banner across the stage read, "Congratulations, Class of 20, and Samantha stood at the podium in her cap and gown. He had watched this part more than a dozen times. "To my mother," Samantha said in the video, voice steady but soft, "Thank you for being my compass, for your strength, your laughter, your late-night pep talks. You are my guiding light." The camera in the video panned slightly to show the audience clapping, some wiping tears. Samantha stood tall, proud, poised, just like Monique had taught her. "And to my father," she continued, "thank you for working hard, for making sure we always had what we needed." Paul tapped pause right there. That sentence always caught in his chest, every time. For making sure we always had what we needed. She hadn't said he was there for her. She hadn't said he was her rock or her protector or anything close to how she described Monique. Just that he worked hard. The applause had still come, polite and warm. Monique had watched it from her hospital bed, too weak to attend but proud all the same. She had smiled at that line, even nodded. But Paul remembered watching her eyes then. There had been something else in them. Not disappointment, not judgment, just sadness. A quiet kind of knowing. "You heard it too, didn't you?" He whispered into the empty night. "She thanked me for the money, not the memories." He rewound the video, played it again. Samantha's voice filled the porch speakers. "Thank you for working hard." He stopped the video, closed the screen. I looked out at the yard. The grass needed mowing. Monique would have reminded him by now. He sighed, rubbing his hands together. The door creaked behind him. Samantha's footsteps were soft. "Did you watch it again?" she asked quietly, stepping onto the porch. Paul didn't turn around right away. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "I did." She sat down in the chair beside him, legs crossed under her. Her hoodie sleeves covered her hands. "You think I was trying to say something, don't you?" Paul looked at her finally. "I think you were saying everything." Samantha didn't speak for a moment. Her face was calm, unreadable. "I meant what I said," she replied. "You always made sure we were okay." "I wasn't lying." Paul nodded. "I know. But I also know what you didn't say." Another pause. "I didn't want to lie to Mom," she admitted, her voice lower now. She was watching. That sentence cut deeper than she likely knew. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she added quickly, "but I couldn't pretend. Not that day." Paul swallowed hard. "You didn't need to." I heard the truth loud and clear. The porch fell quiet again. Samantha shifted in her seat, arms folded now. "You know, I used to practice that speech with Mom," she said, not looking at him. "She'd tell me to add something about you, that even if you missed things, you were doing your best. She said I should honor that." Paul stared at the ground. "I didn't know that." Samantha nodded. I think she wanted me to forgive you, even if I wasn't ready. Paul leaned back in his chair. Did it help? She shrugged. It made me think. That's all. They sat there for a long time. No more words. Just the creak of the wood, the hum of distant cars, the soft brush of wind. Paul broke the silence. I've watched that speech 10 times, Samantha. Not because I needed to hear what you said, but because I needed to accept what I didn't. She looked at him now, eyes searching. I want to earn a better speech next time, he said quietly. Samantha didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. We'll see. It was the same answer she'd given at the grave. And for now, it was enough. The sun had begun to set when they returned to the cemetery. It wasn't planned. Paul had been driving. Samantha was in the passenger seat, quiet as usual, earbuds in but no music playing. They had just left Grandma Yvette's house after helping her pack a few of Monique's things. Paul had noticed how carefully Samantha folded each item of her mother's, how she pressed the scarves, smoothed the edges of old cards, and wiped down a photo frame that had gathered dust. Paul didn't say much. He didn't need to. He just watched her. On the way home, without thinking, he made a turn, the one that led back to the hill where Monique was buried. Samantha looked over. Where are we going? I just want to stop for a minute, he said. She didn't argue. The cemetery was quiet. Most of the fresh flowers had wilted from the rain days earlier. A few faded cards were tucked under small stones. The soil over Monique's grave was still settling. They stood side by side. Paul didn't know what to say. Every sentence that came to mind felt either too small or too rehearsed. So he said nothing. He stood with his hands in his pockets, staring at the name carved into stone. Monique Elise Turner Miller. Beloved wife, mother, daughter. She loved fiercely and forgave fully. Samantha knelt down, brushed off a few leaves that had blown across the plaque. Her hands lingered on the edges, fingertips tracing the engraved letters. Paul watched her. She looked so much like her mother in that moment, the quiet strength. The way she handled grief without theatrics, just with presence. He stepped closer. I've been thinking, he said softly, since the funeral. Since everything. Samantha didn't move. Paul hesitated, then continued. I don't know how to do this without her. Not just parenting, life. She made everything easier. She made me better, and I didn't tell her that enough. Not nearly enough. Samantha stood, brushing her knees. Her eyes were glassy but dry. I think she knew, she said, even when you didn't say it. Paul nodded. Maybe, but I wish I'd shown it more. Especially for you. He looked down. I missed a lot, Samantha. I know that. I saw the videos and the pictures and the recitals I was supposed to be at. And I wasn't. I've always told myself I was doing it all for you both. That work was for the family. But I see now. What you needed most was me. Not the job, not the house, me. Samantha looked at him, arms folded. Her expression was unreadable again. But Paul had learned that was her armor. He took a breath, stepped closer. Then, without asking, he reached out, not to hug, not to pat, just to hold her hand. Her fingers twitched. He braced himself for her to pull away. She didn't. She let his hand stay. They stood there for a long time. No speeches, no grand declarations. Just two people, one trying to reconnect, the other deciding if it was safe to trust again. Paul squeezed gently. I don't have any more excuses, he said. No more flights, no more late-night meetings. From now on, I'm here, really here. She didn't answer, but she didn't let go either. That night, Paul sat alone in the living room, the house dim and still. A stack of unopened boxes sat by the couch, some filled with Monique's books, others with photo albums and old letters. One leather-bound journal lay on top. He recognized it. Monique's handwriting was on a yellow sticky note stuck to the cover, for Paul. If I'm not around, this might help. He hesitated. Then I opened it. The entry was dated just 1 month before she passed. Paul is trying, but I can tell he's tired. He thinks being gone means love because he's providing. But I see the hurt in Samantha's eyes when he misses her. Events. I know he means well, but I wish he'd just pause and look, really look, at what's happening in his own home. I pray he doesn't wake up too late. Paul read it twice, 3 times. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt. The words burned. She had seen it all, known everything. Still, she left him a note with hope in it. He whispered aloud, "I won't waste that hope, Monique." And in the quiet of the living room, he made his silent vow. No more absentee parenting, no more hiding behind busy. I will be there for her, fully, always, not just to make up for the past, but to build a better future. The house was full but hollow. They lived under the same roof, but it might as well have been 2 different homes. Paul's office stayed lit late into the night, not with meetings but with his own restless pacing. Samantha's door stayed closed, even during dinner. They crossed paths like strangers, cordial, quiet, distant. They didn't fight, but they didn't connect either. Sometimes Paul would knock lightly at her door. "You good?" "Yeah." Short answers, no follow-ups. He'd leave her alone, telling himself she needed space. Truthfully, he didn't know what to do with her sadness. Monique had always known. She would knock twice, then enter with hot cocoa, sit on the bed uninvited, and get Samantha talking. Paul wasn't built like that. One afternoon, he heard Samantha laughing faintly from her room. It was the first sound of joy he'd heard in weeks. He knocked. "Yeah?" she said. "Hey, you okay in there?" "I'm fine, just watching something." "Okay, just checking." He stood there awkwardly for a moment longer before walking away. Downstairs, he sat alone in the kitchen. Monique's apron still hung on the hook behind the pantry. He hadn't touched it. The silence between him and Samantha was thick, not loud, not hostile, just constant. He'd check on her. She'd respond. They'd both retreat again. At night, he'd replay old voicemail messages from Monique, her voice cheerful and warm, reminding him to pick up milk or remember Samantha's choir night. He'd press the phone to his chest after the message ended. She had been the bridge. Without her, they were both stuck on opposite sides of something they didn't know how to cross. The differences had always been there. Monique had filled their home with color, music, and loud family dinners. Her church family was extended kin. Her neighborhood cookouts, block parties, and choir rehearsals were stitched into their lives. Paul had always admired it, from a distance. He was used to business dinners with layered politeness, quiet households, work calendars on the fridge instead of prayer cards. Samantha had grown up with both cultures, but she lived in Monique's rhythm. Now that rhythm was gone. And Paul didn't know the steps. One evening, he found Samantha in the living room scrolling her phone. A video from a church event was playing, the last one Monique had sung in. The gospel choir's energy, the clapping, the movement. It had been a part of Monique's world. Paul had attended, sure, but he never really entered it. "You miss it?" he asked, nodding at the video. Samantha looked up briefly. "Yeah. You ever think about going back?" She shrugged. "It's weird without Mom. Everyone loved her there. Now I'd just be the girl whose mom died." Paul wanted to say something, maybe that he'd go with her. But he didn't. He didn't want to intrude. He didn't even know if he'd be welcomed. That Sunday, Paul watched from the kitchen as Samantha left for church alone. She wore the same earrings Monique used to wear on Sundays. They caught the sunlight as she closed the door. Later that week, Paul received a church newsletter in the mail. It had Monique's picture on the back page, a tribute. He stared at it. He realized this was her world, one filled with people who'd known her far deeper than some of his colleagues ever did. She didn't just serve in the choir. She taught youth Bible study, ran the food drive, helped single moms fill out housing forms. He hadn't known all of that. Not really. And now he wasn't sure how to step into that world, or how to bring Samantha into his. Grief hit Paul differently. Not in loud moments, but in the quiet ones. Standing in doorways, looking at chairs that would never be filled again. He tried not to break in front of Samantha. He thought being composed would keep her steady. But the truth was, he was struggling. He'd sit in meetings pretending to take notes, while in his head, he was replaying the moment the nurse had said, "She didn't make it." He cancelled 2 major presentations without explanation. I started forgetting things, names, passwords, deadlines. At home, grief crept into the mundane. He burned a pan of rice, trying to follow one of Monique's handwritten recipes. He threw it out before Samantha could see. One night, he picked up a cardigan that still smelled like her. He sat in the dark, holding it, trying to hear her voice. He cried quietly into the fabric. He didn't tell anyone, not even Grandma Yvette. He was supposed to be the strong one. At dinner, Samantha pushed her food around her plate. "You okay, Dad?" Paul looked up, surprised. "Yeah, you?" "Fine." Neither of them were, but both nodded like the lie helped. Saturday afternoon, Paul drove Samantha to Grandma Yvette's house. It was Monique's childhood home, the same narrow porch, same creaky steps, same cinnamon smell from the kitchen. Paul had always liked the house, even if he never felt entirely at home in it. Samantha walked in like she'd never left. Yvette greeted her with open arms and a kiss to the cheek. Paul followed behind, awkwardly carrying 2 boxes. "Good to see you, baby," Yvette said warmly, then turned to Paul. "You too, Paul. Come on in." They sat in the living room sorting Monique's things, photo albums, choir robes, old notebooks with doodles and scribbles from her teenage years. Paul found a folder labeled Mom Stuff in Samantha's handwriting, birthday cards, drawings, ticket stubs from dance recitals. He paused, recognizing his own absence in so many of those moments. At one point, Samantha held up a purple bracelet. "She wore this every day my freshman year." Yvette smiled, said it was her good luck charm while you were trying out for the track team. Paul remembered Monique calling that day. He'd been boarding a plane, promised he'd call back, then forgot. He never heard how tryouts went. Now he was hearing about it from a bracelet. Later, while Yvette and Samantha baked cookies, Paul stood quietly by the window. He didn't interrupt. He watched as Yvette guided Samantha's hands through kneading the dough, telling stories about Monique's childhood, how she'd sneak cookies before dinner, how she cried when her first choir solo cracked, how she once cut her own bangs and blamed it on the dog. Paul chuckled quietly. It was the most at peace he'd seen Samantha in weeks. He realized then, to rebuild anything with her, he'd need to walk through Monique's world, not just invite her into his. That evening, while unpacking a final box from Yvette's house, Paul found Monique's journal. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't labeled for him, but a folded note stuck out. "Paul, if you're reading this, I hope you're listening." He hesitated, then opened the page where the note was tucked. "I'm tired, not from the illness, but from carrying everything alone. I wish Paul could see Samantha's eyes when he misses something important. She doesn't cry, she hardens. I hate seeing that. He's not a bad man. He's just blind sometimes to what matters. I pray one day he sees before it's too late." Paul shut the book. He stood in the middle of the living room, frozen. The weight of it wasn't new, but seeing it written in her hand, it landed differently. He opened it again. The next page had a photo clipped to it, Samantha in a costume, her 8th grade play. The one he'd missed. Monique had written below it. She kept looking at the 3rd row. "That's where you were supposed to sit." Paul sat down. No noise. Just him, the book, and the truth. He read every page. Some were hopeful. Some were heavy. All of them were honest. She loved him. But she had seen everything. The next morning, Paul made pancakes from scratch. They were lumpy, undercooked in the middle, a little burnt at the edges. Samantha raised a brow. Mom never added cinnamon. "I panicked," Paul replied. She smirked. "I'll still eat them." It was small, but something shifted. Later that week, he asked if he could join her at church. She blinked, caught off guard. "Really? If it's okay with you?" She shrugged, but she said yes. That Sunday, he sat beside her on the 2nd row, sang what he could, clapped when appropriate, shook hands, smiled politely. After service, he stayed through the potluck, helped carry folding chairs, let someone's aunt fix his plate. Samantha noticed. The week after, he met with the youth coordinator, offered to help sponsor the annual retreat Monique used to plan. She'd want me to keep it going, he said. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't smooth. But he was showing up. Samantha started to soften. She asked his opinion on a college essay, shared a meme with him, told him about a friend who just got dumped. They weren't close yet, but they were closer. That night, Paul scrolled through an old photo of Monique holding a toddler Samantha. They were both covered in flour, laughing in the kitchen. He posted it to his private social account with a simple caption. They held everything together. I'm just learning how to catch up. He paused, then added, fellas, don't wait until it's too late to show up for your kids. He stared at the screen, then turned to his camera, hit record and said, if this story hit you, drop a family together. In the comments for all the mums who held the... He sent the video to the gala organizer. Samantha saw it later. She didn't say much. Just left a heart emoji in the thread. Paul smiled. It wasn't approval, but it was enough to keep going. Paul sat at the head of the dining table, papers spread out before him, quarterly projections, merger reports, staffing restructures. His laptop chimed with Slack notifications, while his phone buzzed endlessly beside his untouched plate of scrambled eggs. Across the table, Samantha sat silently, spooning cereal into her mouth without looking up. She had grown used to the early morning chaos of his routine. Wake, suit up, call New York, dial into Tokyo, rush out. That was their rhythm. Two people in one house, living entirely different lives. But lately, things were shifting. Paul glanced at her. 16, hair in a messy puff, eyes glued to her phone. She wasn't angry anymore, just distant. She had stopped expecting anything. He cleared his throat. Hey, Sam, do you need a ride to school? No thanks. I already texted Nia's mom. Right, Nia's mom. That woman had probably picked Samantha up more times than he had this year. Paul nodded slowly. Okay, cool. He wanted to say more. He really did, but another ping drew his eyes back to the screen. Later that afternoon, he stood outside Samantha's school, leaning against the SUV he barely drove himself. He had blocked off 2 hours on his calendar, marked it red in all caps, daughter priority. She emerged from the front entrance, chatting with 2 girls, earbuds in, hoodie up. When she spotted him, her face twisted in surprise. You okay? She asked cautiously, yanking her earbud out. Yeah, he smiled. Just thought I'd pick you up today. She slid into the passenger seat without another. Halfway through the drive, he said, there's food at home. Or we could grab something? I'm good. Her replies were short, civil, but guarded. Paul tapped the steering wheel, searching for something, anything, to fill the space. I've been trying to cut back on travel. Told my assistant to cancel the Asia trip. That's cool, she replied flatly. They drove in silence again. At home, he set the table and served pasta he had microwaved himself. Samantha barely touched it. I can cook, she said suddenly. Paul blinked. Huh? I said, I can cook for myself. You don't have to keep pretending. He dropped his fork, stung. I'm not pretending. Samantha shrugged. You were never home. Now you're here acting like this is normal. It's not. He wanted to argue, to defend all the years he was working to provide, but he knew that wasn't the point. Not now. She stood up from the table, dumped her plate in the sink, and disappeared upstairs. Paul stared at her empty seat, a knot forming in his chest. Every effort felt like it came too late, every gesture suspicious. This wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about years missed, birthdays ignored, tears never noticed. The next morning, Paul called a meeting with his executive team. Effective immediately, I'll be stepping back from day-to-day operations, he announced. They stared at him in shock. You're resigning? No, I'm restructuring my time. Less travel, fewer late nights. I'll work remote unless absolutely necessary. There was murmuring, concerned looks exchanged. His co leaned forward. Paul, the acquisition talks. I trust you'll handle them, Paul interrupted calmly. He wasn't just their boss anymore. He was a father trying to reclaim ground already lost. That evening, Samantha passed by the study and paused. Her father, the same man who used to be unreachable after 7 p.m., was on the floor, assembling a TV stand he ordered for her room. "Why are you doing all this now?" she asked quietly. Paul looked up. "Because I should have been doing it all along." She didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. He held up the instruction manual. "You any good at this?" Samantha rolled her eyes, stepped inside, and sat beside him. For the next hour, they built in silence. It was awkward, but it was a start. It started with a forgotten lunch. Paul had packed Samantha's favorite chicken Caesar wrap, or so he thought, but left it sitting on the kitchen counter during the morning scramble. She texted him just before noon. "You forgot it." Paul was in a board meeting when he saw it, but excused himself anyway. 30 minutes later, Samantha stepped through the tall glass doors of Langston Capital Group. It was sleek, cold, and intimidating, everything she imagined it to be. Receptionists in pencil skirts, suits buzzing past with coffee and folders, phones ringing in hushed tones. She stood awkwardly near the entrance, until Paul's assistant spotted her. "You must be Samantha." She smiled warmly. "Come with me." The office was modern, wide open, walls lined with success, awards, photos with governors, and tech giants, his TEDx stage shot framed neatly beside a Forbes cover. Samantha walked slowly into his private office. Paul stood behind his desk. Hey. He handed her the lunch bag. "Sorry, forgot I left it." She took it without a smile, looking around instead. "So, this is it, huh?" Paul nodded. "Yep." "The lair." She moved toward the window, staring out at the skyline. "It's nice." He could tell she didn't mean it. She turned, arms crossed. "How many birthdays did you miss in this room?" He blinked. "I mean, how many parent-teacher conferences, school plays, days Mom begged you to just stay home?" Paul exhaled slowly. "Too many." She stared at him. "You know," she said, "I used to ask Mom if you were a spy or something, because you were never around. She just said you were working for our future. But the present sucked, Dad." He dropped his gaze. "I thought, maybe if I saw this place I'd understand. But I don't. It's just another cold building." He stepped toward her. "Sam, I gotta go." She walked out without touching her lunch. Paul sat at his desk long after she left. He cancelled 2 meetings and turned his phone face down. The silence was heavier than the busiest conference room. He stared at the spot she stood in, hearing her voice on loop. The present sucked. Dad. That evening, Samantha came down for dinner without being called. She microwaved leftovers and sat beside him at the counter. Neither spoke for a while. Then, softly, she asked, "Why now?" Paul looked up. "You were never around. Not even when Mom got sick. So, why are you trying now?" He didn't rush to answer. I thought success would make everything okay. That if I built a good life, it would make up for not being present." He paused. "But then I realized I was building a future without you in it." Samantha didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. She finished her plate, rinsed it, and placed it in the dishwasher. That night, Paul sat in his study and opened a folder labeled Family. Inside were photos of Monique and Samantha, unused plane tickets from a cancelled family trip, letters he never sent. He placed them all on the desk, one by one, like trying to put pieces of his own life back together. It was a Sunday morning. Quiet. Samantha was watching old family tapes on her iPad, clips Paul had forgotten even existed until she found them. He stood behind her silently, arms crossed, watching the screen over her shoulder. In the video, a much younger Paul, leaner, more carefree, struggled to dance at a summer cookout. Monique was laughing so hard she nearly dropped the camera. "You were so stiff," Samantha chuckled. Paul smiled. "I still am." Another clip played, Monique standing in a church hallway, pregnant with Samantha, rubbing her belly and saying, This one's going to change our world. Samantha paused the video. Tell me about her, she said quietly. Paul sat beside her. You sure? She nodded. Your mother and I met at an event I didn't want to attend, Paul began. A friend dragged me to a community fundraiser, said I needed to touch grass. Samantha grinned. She was working the room like she ran the place, and she kind of did. Everyone loved her. I spilled champagne on her dress. Smooth, Samantha said. I know, right? Paul smiled. She looked me dead in the eye and said, if you're going to waste my time, at least make it memorable. So I asked her to dance. He paused, lost in thought. She wore this deep green dress that night. She hated the color, said it made her skin look too bold, but I thought she looked like royalty. Paul leaned back. Her family was from Atlanta, loud, close Southern hospitality all the way. Big Sunday dinners, cousins like siblings, gospel music, laughter that could shake the walls. My world? He motioned around the room. Boardrooms, silence, golf and mergers, private school, politeness instead of honesty. She showed me life, he added, taught me to slow down. That success meant nothing if you couldn't feel joy. But we had fights, he admitted, about culture, raising you, how to spend holidays. I wanted structure. She wanted soul. Samantha listened carefully. He smiled. One time we went to a jazz bar in Harlem. It was mostly locals. I felt so out of place in my suit. She cut him off that night, literally dragged him onto the floor. I said I couldn't dance. She said, you're not here to perform, you're here to feel. Samantha tilted her head. She said that? Verbatim. Paul looked at her. She taught me how to season food, how to read between the lines when your grandma Yvette said, bless your heart. How to pray without a script. How to apologize from the gut, not the mouth. She also made me promise I'd never forget where she came from, that I'd raise you with both roots, not just mine. He swallowed. I think I failed her there. Later that night, Samantha knocked on Paul's study door. She was holding a photo box. Mom kept this, she said. It's got old letters, your wedding vows, her journals. I thought maybe we could go through it, together. He looked stunned, but nodded slowly. They sat on the carpet. As they flipped through the photos, beach trips, hospital visits, baby Samantha, with wild curly hair, Paul pointed out stories behind each moment. They laughed. They cried. And for the first time, they felt like a father and daughter. Not just two people grieving the same woman. The photo box had been sitting in Samantha's room for weeks, unopened. She'd taken it out to show Paul earlier, but they had only skimmed the surface. Photos, invitations, silly notes, even an old ultrasound picture. But beneath the final layer, under a bundle of hospital receipts and dried rose petals, was a leather-bound journal with frayed corners and a snapped elastic band. Samantha brought it to Paul late one evening. She didn't say anything, just handed it to him and sat on the edge of the couch. Paul stared at the cover. It was Monique's handwriting on the inside flap. If I'm not here, I hope this speaks louder than I ever could. He exhaled slowly. The entries weren't many, just short reflections over the last 6 months of her life. Some were sweet. Paul made dinner tonight. It was terrible, but he tried. I love that man. Others were weary. I wish he'd stop thinking he has forever. None of us do. One page was dog-eared. Samantha had already read it. She watched him now as he read it too. I see them both slipping. Paul thinks providing is enough. Samantha needs his presence, not his paycheck. But he can't hear me. And I'm scared. Scared that after I'm gone, she'll look for him and find no one. Or worse, she won't even look. Paul's hand trembled slightly as he closed the journal. He said nothing for a long time. Samantha could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. It was the only sound in the room. Paul finally spoke. She knew. Samantha nodded. She always knew. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said softly. Working, building, making sure you'd never need anything. She didn't want all that, Samantha whispered. She wanted you here. He looked at her then. Not just looked, saw her. Saw the teenager who had learned to stop waiting for his attention, the one who now carried her mother's quiet strength and buried her own loneliness beneath sarcasm and music. "I failed both of you," Paul said. "No," Samantha said, voice steady. "But you almost did." The next morning, Paul didn't go to the office. He didn't open his laptop. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and stared out the window. At 8:30 a.m., his assistant called. He let it ring. At 9:15, his partner texted, "You good?" Paul replied with 2 words, "Not today." Samantha peeked around the corner, surprised to find him still in his robe. "You sick?" she asked. "Nope." "You quitting?" He chuckled. "Not quite." "You having a breakdown?" He turned to her. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just listening, for once." She blinked, then smirked. "About time." Paul stared at his calendar the next morning like it was written in a foreign language. Board meeting, investor call, strategy session, flight to Chicago, dinner with prospective partners. Each event was typed in clean Arial font, but every word made him sick. The very structure that had given him power now felt like a prison. He clicked into his schedule and began deleting, one by one. Click, delete, click, decline, click, reschedule. He paused at one entry, quarterly shareholder luncheon, keynote. He hovered over the decline button, then picked up the phone. "Rachel," he said to his assistant, "move the keynote 2 weeks out and block every Friday after 2 p.m. indefinitely. No calls, no meetings." "Sir?" "Family comes first. Effective immediately." The board was confused. His team was concerned. "Paul, are you okay? Do you need time off? Is something wrong with your health?" He smiled through each call. "No crisis. I'm just making room." "For what?" one partner asked bluntly. "For someone who's waited long enough." It didn't take long for Samantha to see something was off. He was home before dinner, 2 days in a row. He wasn't on the phone at the table. He asked questions, real ones, about her day, her school, her music. "You trying to bribe me?" she asked one evening. He shrugged. "Would it work?" She cracked a smile. "Maybe." But the biggest change wasn't the time, it was how he used it. He didn't just sit around. He was there, present, not always perfect, sometimes awkward, sometimes too much. But he was trying, and for the first time, it felt real. One Saturday morning, Paul knocked on her bedroom door. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. Samantha sat up in bed. "Is this about my grades? Because, no. It's about us." She folded her arms, curious. "I've been doing things backwards for a long time," Paul began. "Thinking money solves everything, that my presence didn't matter as long as the bills were paid." She didn't respond. "I can't change what I missed, but I'm here now, and I want in. If you'll let me." Samantha looked away for a moment. "What does that even look like?" He smiled. "Let's find out." It started small. Samantha walked into the kitchen one night and saw Paul already prepping dinner. "Spaghetti?" she asked, surprised. He nodded. "Your grandma taught me. I even bought garlic bread. Not the frozen kind." She rolled her eyes but didn't leave. She leaned against the counter, watching. When he nearly dropped the sauce jar, she laughed. "You're seriously dangerous with kitchen tools. Better with contracts than colanders," he muttered. She didn't offer to help, but she stayed. That night, they ate at the table. Together. No phones, no background noise, just 2 forks clinking plates and silence that felt comfortable. A week later, Samantha knocked on his office door at home. He blinked. "Hey, what's up?" She hesitated. "So, there's this school talent show." He straightened up. "You're performing?" "No. I helped choreograph one of the dances. It's not a big deal or anything." He stood up. "I'll be there." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't even ask when it is." "Doesn't matter. Send me the time." He showed up early, sat front row, recorded the entire performance on his phone. even though Samantha wasn't on stage. After the show, she found him outside. "You didn't have to come that early," she said. He shrugged. Didn't want to risk missing anything. She smiled. "Thanks." Samantha's 17th birthday landed on a Wednesday. Paul cleared his schedule. No meetings, no phone calls. She came home from school expecting a generic gift card and a cake from the store. Instead, she walked into a room filled with her favorite music, posters from her favorite TV show, and a custom-made scrapbook with photos of her and her mom. At the bottom of the scrapbook was a note. "I know I've missed a lot of birthdays, but I'm here now, and every year forward is ours to celebrate, together." She stared at the note for a long time, then hugged him without saying a word. It was the first time she'd hugged him without hesitation in years. From that day, the doors opened a little wider. She let him drive her to practice. She asked him to listen to songs she liked. She texted him random memes and inside jokes. Some days, they still had awkward silences. Some dinners were quiet. Some weekends passed without deep conversations. But the walls weren't as high anymore. They were learning to walk together. Slowly. Not father and daughter by force, but by choice. Spring break was around the corner. Samantha sat at the dining table flipping through a magazine, while Paul checked his emails across from her. "I was thinking," he said carefully, "we should go somewhere." She glanced up. "Somewhere like..." "Where?" He took a deep breath. "New York. Just the two of us. No phones, no meetings, just you and me. Broadway, museums, bagels, whatever you want." She blinked. "You'd survive 2 days without checking your inbox. I'll delete the app off my phone if you agree." She stared at him for a long moment, then said, "What's playing on Broadway?" They took the train into the city. Paul wore a Yankees cap to blend in. Samantha rolled her eyes, calling it tourist camouflage. They wandered through Central Park with coffee cups in hand, took selfies at Times Square, and grabbed pizza from a corner shop that Samantha insisted was TikTok famous. That night, they sat front row at a Broadway show, Paul's first. Samantha kept glancing at him during the emotional scenes, watching his face. At one point, a scene between a grieving father and his daughter played out. Paul's eyes welled up. She didn't say anything, but she quietly reached for his hand and held it. After the show, they walked slowly through Manhattan. The air was crisp, the streets busy but comforting. Paul said, "I used to come here with your mom. She'd drag me to shows, then force me to try weird food." Samantha laughed. "Sounds like her." He turned to her. "You remind me of her. Not just the way you smile, but the way you look at people like they're puzzles you want to understand." Samantha's voice was quiet. "Do you ever still hear her voice in your head?" He nodded. "Every day, especially when I'm about to mess something up." She smiled sadly. "Same." They sat on a bench in Bryant Park, and for once, neither one was trying to fill the silence. They checked into a small boutique hotel in Soho. Paul had booked a room with twin beds. Samantha teased, "Afraid I'll snore and scare you." He grinned. "That's exactly it." The next morning, Paul surprised her with breakfast in bed, bagels, fruit, and her favorite smoothie flavor. On their final day, they visited a jazz club Monique used to love. A singer with a voice like velvet performed a song that had once played during Paul and Monique's first dance. He closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. When he opened them, he saw Samantha watching him. "She loved this place," she whispered. "She would have loved you here," he replied. On the train ride home, Samantha rested her head on his shoulder and fell asleep. Paul stared out the window, the city skyline fading behind them, and felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. This trip hadn't fixed everything, but it proved something important. Rebuilding was possible. Not by force, not overnight, but by showing up, by staying present, by loving consistently. And for once, Paul didn't feel like a guest in his daughter's world. He was finally starting to belong. That evening, after their return from New York, Paul stood outside Samantha's bedroom door with an old photo in his hand, one Monique had taken of the three of them at a beach in Florida years ago. He knocked gently. Samantha opened the door in her pajamas. "Yeah?" He lifted the photo. I found this in one of the boxes downstairs. She looked at it for a long time. Then, quietly, that was a good day. I was thinking, he said, maybe we could start a new photo album, just you and me, new memories. She shrugged. Sure. Why not? Paul smiled. It wasn't enthusiastic, but it wasn't a no. The next morning, Paul woke up early. He beat her to the kitchen for once. When Samantha came down, the table was set with her favorite pancakes, whipped cream, and berries. She raised an eyebrow. You did all this? He nodded. And no fire. That's progress. She smirked. Not bad, Mr. CEO. Paul tilted his head. Actually, I turned in my resignation last night. Samantha froze. Wait, what? I handed the company over to the board. Effective next month. Her mouth dropped open. Are you serious? He nodded. I missed too much already. I'm not missing the rest. She blinked rapidly. What will you even do now? He shrugged. Learn how to make better pancakes. She laughed. A real, belly-deep laugh. It was the first time he'd heard it in years. Later that week, Samantha was cleaning out one of her drawers when she found an envelope addressed to no one. She opened it. It was a letter she'd written 2 years ago, one she never gave to him. In it, she poured out everything. The anger, the loneliness, the birthdays he missed. The way she used to sit by the window, hoping to see his car in the driveway. She stared at it for a long time. Then she walked downstairs, handed it to Paul and said, It's old, but I think you should read it. He sat silently as he read it. When he looked up, his eyes were full. He didn't try to explain or defend. He just stood and hugged her. She didn't pull away. Sunday morning, Paul and Samantha arrived early to church. Grandma Yvette beamed as she saw them walk in together. During the service, Samantha leaned into her father's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her. At one point, the pastor said, God can mend even what we've given up on, if we just make space for healing. Paul closed his eyes. That night, Samantha posted a photo of the two of them on her social media. A simple caption. Sometimes love doesn't look like perfection. It looks like effort. Thank you, Dad. If you've ever watched a family fight their way back from silence, if you know what it's like to miss someone who's still right there in front of you, if you believe that second chances, real hard-earned second chances, can heal even the deepest cracks in a family, subscribe to this channel. Like and comment if this story moved you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's not too late. Because someone out there is one I'm sorry, away from a brand new beginning. It started with a knock on the door. Paul had just returned from morning prayer with Samantha, something they'd begun doing every Saturday. She was making coffee in the kitchen, humming along to an old Anita Baker tune when Greg, his COO, appeared in the doorway, holding his phone like it was on fire. Paul, sorry to just show up like this, Greg said. It's Dubai. One of our biggest investors is pulling out. If we don't fix this now, the ripple effect could tank our third quarter projections. Paul didn't say anything at first. He looked down the hallway toward the kitchen. The aroma of cinnamon rolls drifted through the air. Samantha had made them from scratch, her mother's recipe. Greg hesitated. You're the only one who can fix this. Paul took the phone, scanning the urgent emails and calendar notifications piling in. His flight could leave in 4 hours. He could be in Dubai by morning. Solve this in 48 hours. Be back before Samantha noticed. Old instincts kicked in. Fix the problem. Save the company. Be the hero. But as he stood there, suitcase already being packed in his mind, Samantha walked in holding 2 mugs. Her smile faded when she saw Greg. Work? She asked. Greg looked at Paul, waiting. Paul inhaled slowly. Yeah. There's an issue in Dubai. Her eyes dropped to the floor, and she handed him the mug. You should go, then. That line hurt more than any investor ever could. Greg glanced between them. I'll wait in the car. When the door shut, Paul stood in silence. Cinnamon, coffee, and the distance between them hung in the air. He put the mug down. I'm not going. Samantha looked up, startled. What? He pulled out his phone and typed a short message. Stepping back for now. My family needs me. Handle it. Pull the send button was like a gavel in a courtroom. This time, he chose her. That afternoon, Paul and Samantha walked through the University of Southern California campus. Golden leaves crunched beneath their feet as they followed a student guide pointing out lecture halls and libraries. Samantha had been quiet for most of the tour, earbuds in, nodding absently at the guide's jokes. Paul tried not to hover, tried not to ask too many questions, but he felt like an intern in a foreign department. When they reached the arts building, Samantha finally pulled out one earbud. "This is where they host the student showcases," she said. "They feature dancers, actors, poets. Mom would have loved it." Paul smiled gently. "She would have been front row, screaming your name." That earned a half smile. Progress. They walked past a mural of alumni in caps and gowns. Samantha slowed. "You really didn't have to come today." Paul nodded. "I did. I need to be here, not just for college tours, but for everything. I want to be a father in the present, not a visitor from the past." She said nothing. But she didn't put the earbuds back in. They sat on a bench near the bookstore, sipping iced tea. Paul watched students zip by on skateboards, some talking to parents, others hugging their little siblings. He finally broke the silence. "Sammy, can I ask you something?" She raised her brow. "Since when do you ask permission?" He chuckled, then sobered. "Are you really okay?" She swirled the ice around in her cup. "Is that what you want to hear? That I'm okay, because then you'll feel better about everything?" Paul exhaled. "No, I want to hear the truth, even if it's hard." She turned toward him. "I'm not okay, Dad. I haven't been okay for years. And pretending to be okay so you won't feel guilty, that's exhausting." Paul looked down at his shoes. She continued, softer now. "I'm glad you're trying. But there are things you can't just fix with money or one trip. Some things don't just go away." He nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was honest. Back at the hotel, Paul and Samantha ordered room service and flipped through old family albums on Samantha's iPad. They came across a photo of Monique, dressed in her favorite yellow dress, arms around a 6-year-old Samantha. "That was the summer she took me to Lake Arrowhead," Samantha said. "I got stung by a bee and cried for an hour. She carried me on her back the whole trail." Paul smiled, then paused. "I wish I had been there more." Samantha looked at him. "You weren't there that night either." The words cut. He tried to steady his voice. "You mean when she passed?" She nodded. "You were in Tokyo. Some conference." She collapsed in the kitchen. "I was the one who called 911. Paul felt the weight of that silence. He'd never asked her about that night. Never thought she'd want to talk about it. "I was just 13, she said quietly. I sat in the ambulance, holding her hand, begging her to wake up. Paul's throat tightened. "I failed you." "And her?" Samantha looked at him, eyes glossy. "I needed you. But you chose the boardroom." That night, Paul couldn't sleep. He sat in the hotel lobby at 2 a.m., laptop open, but unread emails blurred on the screen. Samantha's words echoed in his head. You chose the boardroom. He had built an empire, yes, but at what cost? He had walked into shareholder meetings while his daughter walked into funerals. He had mentored rising executives while missing every school play. His fists clenched. Greg had sent another email. Dubai's situation worsening. Are you sure you can stay offline this week? Paul didn't reply. He closed the laptop. He realized he couldn't undo the past, but he could stand in the present, even if it hurt, even if he had to sit in the silence of his own mistakes. 2 days later, Paul received an invitation in the mail. The upcoming Unity Gala. He was being honored for his philanthropy in education. They asked him to speak on fatherhood and legacy. He laughed bitterly at first, but Grandma Yvette, who had joined them in LA, placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe it's time to stop hiding behind your wallet and start speaking from your heart, she said. He stayed up all night writing, not stats, not metrics, not business lessons, but moments, mistakes, the cost of absence, the power of presence. He wanted Samantha to hear the truth. What Paul didn't know was that Samantha had been asked to say a few words at the same gala. The organizers thought it would be a touching surprise. Grandma Yvette kept it quiet. Samantha wrote late at night, headphones in, typing furiously on her notes app. Her words weren't about perfection. They were about pain and grace, and what it meant to forgive a man who was learning how to be a father for the first time. One afternoon, Samantha and Grandma Yvette sat on a park bench near the hotel. "What if I cry up there?" Samantha asked. "Then cry," Yvette said simply. "Real strength isn't in holding back tears, it's in speaking through them." Samantha stared at her notes. "I'm not ready." "You are," Yvette said. "Because this isn't just about him, it's about your healing." Samantha nodded slowly. The night of the gala arrived. Guests in suits and dresses filled the ballroom. The stage was bathed in gold light. Paul stood at the podium, hands shaking. He looked out at the crowd, then at Samantha in the front row. She gave a small nod. Paul cleared his throat. "I wasn't there the night my wife died," he began, "and I almost missed my daughter's entire life." Gasps from the audience. Paul continued, "I thought building companies made me a good man, but what really matters is being present when it's inconvenient, listening when it's uncomfortable, choosing love when it's hard." He paused. "I failed, but I'm still here, and I'm not leaving." Applause. Not the polite kind, the kind that carried weight, the kind that said, "We see you." And behind that podium, for the first time in years, Paul felt like a father. If this story touched you in any way, please like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe family deserves a second chance, subscribe for more stories like this one. The ballroom lights dimmed as Paul walked up to the podium. The crowd quieted. He took a breath, gripping the sides of the lectern, his heart hammering in his chest. For a moment he stared at the faces in the crowd, business leaders, educators, parents, students, families, people he'd spoken in front of dozens of times. But tonight was different. "I wasn't there the night my wife died," Paul began. "And for a long time after that, I wasn't there for my daughter either." The silence in the room thickened. Every word came from somewhere deep inside him, a part of him he'd buried behind meetings and flights and responsibilities. "I used to think being a man meant building something the world couldn't ignore, but I missed what mattered most. I missed bedtime stories. I missed recitals. I missed tears. I should have wiped and laughs I should have shared." He paused, his eyes wet. "When I was young, my father left. I told myself I'd never do the same, but I did, just in a different way." A murmur moved through the room. Paul didn't stop. "But my daughter, Samantha, she's taught me that failure doesn't have to be final. That love isn't about showing up perfect. It's about showing up anyway." The crowd sat in stillness. Paul's voice cracked as he said, "To every father out there, show up. Even if you're late, show up. Apologize. Hold your kids. Let them know they matter more than anything you'll ever build." He stepped back slowly from the podium. Before the applause could rise, Paul leaned back into the microphone. "My story doesn't start with me being a CEO. It starts with me being a broken boy, waiting on the porch for a man who never came back." Gasps flickered around the room. "I remember the day my mom told me he wasn't coming. I was 7. I waited until it got dark, just in case he changed his mind. He didn't. And when Monique passed, I did the same thing to my daughter without even realizing it." He wiped his face. "I buried myself in work, in pain, in anything that made me feel productive so I wouldn't feel guilty." Paul paused, then looked directly at Samantha, seated in the front row. "You deserved better. And I know saying sorry doesn't erase the years, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you needed all along." This wasn't a business speech. This was a man breaking open, rebuilding from the inside. The room was silent. No coughing, no whispering, no shifting chairs. Even the sound crew backstage forgot to breathe. A man at the back of the room quietly wiped his eyes. A woman in the front clutched her husband's hand. Phones meant for social media were lowered, replaced with hands covering hearts. It wasn't the words, it was the courage, the rawness. This man, polished and powerful, was now peeled back to the truth, flawed, bruised, and reaching. The host of the event stood frozen, visibly moved. No one expected a business gala to turn into a confessional. But here it was, real, honest. A few scattered claps broke the silence, then more. Then the entire room stood. As the crowd cheered, Samantha slowly stood. Paul turned, confused. She walked toward the second podium the host had prepared, just in case. The room hushed again. "I didn't plan to speak tonight," Samantha began, her voice trembling. "But I have something to share. Something my mom left behind." The audience leaned forward. She kept a diary. And her last entry wasn't just about her fears. It was a hope. Paul looked stunned. She opened the small, worn leather book. She wrote, "If you're reading this, it means you've both made it here. I hope you're sitting beside your father. I hope he's found his way back. And I hope you told him the truth, that you needed him, but you forgave him anyway." Tears poured down her cheeks. "So here it is, Dad. I forgive you." Samantha turned another page. "There's more," she said. "My mom wrote, remind him that redemption isn't earned in a speech. It's earned in presence, in pancakes on Sunday, in showing up to the boring days. Tell him it's not too late. Tell him I love him. Tell him you love him too." Her voice cracked. "I do, Dad. I love you." Paul fell back into his seat, overwhelmed. The room didn't breathe. Samantha closed the diary, stepped from the podium, and walked to her father. They embraced in full view of the stunned audience. The room exploded into applause. People stood. Some shouted. Some wept. Cameras caught the moment. A businessman and his daughter, no longer separated by silence or shame. Even the host dabbed their eyes. It wasn't just about Paul and Samantha anymore. It was about everyone in the room who hadn't said what needed to be said. It was about parents and children, broken homes, unspoken pain, and the healing that's possible when someone takes the first step. They didn't speak for a while, just held each other. Paul whispered something only Samantha could hear. She nodded. The applause continued. The lights stayed low, and for that brief moment, no one was watching them as a CEO and his daughter. They were just two people finally finding each other again. Tears rolled freely, but none of them were bitter anymore. If this moment hit you, drop a comment below. Who do you need to forgive or ask forgiveness from? Don't wait another year, another birthday, another funeral. Say the words now. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe in second chances, because sometimes they're all we need to start again. The clip of Paul and Samantha embracing on stage swept through the internet like wildfire. Within 24 hours, it had crossed 2 million views. Local news stations replayed the moment on loop. Talk shows debated the layers of pain, redemption, and healing packed into that night. Paul didn't know what to do with the attention. His inbox overflowed. Hundreds of strangers shared their own confessions, regrets, and reconciliations. One man said he drove 4 hours to hug the son he hadn't seen in 5 years. A woman said she forgave her absentee dad after watching Samantha's speech. Back at the office, Paul's employees stopped him in the hallway to say how proud they were. Some cried. Others just gave a quiet nod. But none of them looked at him the same, not as the CEO, as the man who finally stood still long enough to be seen. The messages didn't stop. Old friends from Monique's side reached out, people Paul hadn't spoken to since the funeral. Her cousin Nia called in tears. "I wish Monique could have seen this," she whispered. Letters came in from fathers trying to reconnect with their children. Single mothers wrote, thanking Samantha for voicing what so many children carry but never say. Teenagers tagged her in stories, saying, "You gave me the words I never knew how to say to my dad." Even Grandma Yvette got a few hand-delivered notes at church. One woman said, "I brought my son to service today because of that gala." For Paul, It was overwhelming, but not in a bad way. For once, being seen didn't feel like exposure. It felt like purpose. At first, Paul wasn't sure what he had to offer. "I'm not a pastor," he told Grandma Yvette. "I barely figured things out myself." She smiled. "That's why they'll listen. You're not preaching. You're healing out loud." So he started small. A Saturday breakfast with 5 teenage boys. They ate pancakes and he just listened. Let them talk. Let them complain. Let them laugh. By the 3rd week, the group had doubled. He shared stories. Not just business stories. Stories about messing up. About missing his own daughter's middle school graduation because of a board meeting in Tokyo. About his dad walking out when he was 11. About how shame becomes silence if you let it. One boy, 16, said quietly after a session, "Mr. Paul, can I hug you?" Paul nodded. "Anytime." Samantha started posting more online, not for clout, not for likes, for healing. She uploaded clips from the gala. She wrote captions that pierced people. One said, "We don't talk enough about what absence feels like to a child. It's not just missing birthdays. It's wondering if you were worth staying for." She did a podcast interview. When they asked how she found the courage to speak, she said, "Because my mom was brave in silence. I needed to be brave out loud." Paul watched it 3 times. Didn't say a word. Just sat with it. Then he texted her, "You're everything good in your mom and more." Her reply, a heart emoji, and, "We're getting there, Dad." The trip wasn't planned. It just felt right. Monique had always talked about visiting the Grand Canyon. "I want to see something that reminds me how small my worries really are," she used to say. Paul booked it. No first class, no packed itinerary. Just him, Samantha, and the sky. They stood on the edge of that vast stretch of earth in silence, wind brushing against their skin. Samantha closed her eyes and whispered, "She would have loved this." Paul didn't speak. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out Monique's journal, and handed it to her. They sat on a nearby bench and read entries out loud to each other, laughing, crying, remembering. "I think she'd be proud of us," Samantha said. "She is," Paul replied, without hesitation. Life didn't magically fix itself, but it began to feel like home. Saturday mornings turned into pancake rituals. No phones, no emails, just batter, burnt edges, and inside jokes. Weeknights had a rhythm. Sometimes they played board games, sometimes they just sat on the porch with hot cocoa, talking about everything, talking about nothing. One night, Samantha brought out a photo album Monique had made during her pregnancy. Paul flipped through pages he'd never seen. "She did all this while I was in Shanghai," he murmured. "She forgave you a long time ago, Dad," Samantha said gently. "It's time you forgive yourself." Paul didn't answer. He just closed the album, leaned back, and let the quiet heal what words couldn't. The house didn't change. The furniture stayed the same, but something in the air softened. Laughter came easier. Silences weren't heavy anymore. They were peaceful. Samantha started leaving her door open again. Paul didn't have to knock as often. When she came home from school, she gave him a side hug. Not every day, but more than before. They planted a small garden in the backyard, something Monique always wanted to do. Tomatoes, basil, peppers, nothing fancy. One evening, as they watered the plants, Samantha said, "We should put a bench out here." "For what?" Paul asked. "So when I move out one day, you'll have somewhere to sit and remember this." He smiled. "I'll never forget." The morning sun crept through the curtains as Paul walked past Samantha's room. Her door was slightly open, revealing a floor littered with college brochures, books, a half-packed suitcase, and her laptop still playing soft music. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting clothes. It felt surreal. "You need help?" Paul asked, leaning against the doorframe. Samantha smiled faintly. "Only if you know the difference between a curling wand and a flat iron. I'll pass." They both laughed, the kind of easy laughter that once seemed impossible between them. College was weeks away, and Samantha had decided to attend Spelman in Atlanta, her mother's dream school. The acceptance had arrived with a scholarship, a handwritten note from the admissions board praising her essay about family, forgiveness, and resilience. Paul had read the essay twice. He wept both times. The air in the house was different now, lighter. Meals weren't rushed. They had pancake Sundays again. Porch talks. Even game nights where Paul, predictably, lost every round of Uno. But the packing made it real. She was leaving. And even though Paul was proud, there was a heaviness settling into his chest. 2 days before the college drop-off, Samantha was digging through the bottom drawer of Monique's old nightstand, looking for a missing bracelet. Instead, she found a sealed envelope. Her name was written in Monique's unmistakable cursive. "Dad!" she called, her voice shaky. Paul came into the room, wiping his hands on a dish towel. When he saw the envelope, his heart skipped. "You found something?" "It's for me," she whispered. She opened it slowly. The room fell silent. Monique's words poured out like a gentle stream. "My sweet Samantha, if you're reading this, you're getting ready to fly. I won't be there to zip up your bags or hug you until you can't breathe, but I will always be part of your wings." As Samantha read aloud, her voice cracked several times. Monique's words were both gentle and firm. She encouraged Samantha to forgive her father, to embrace the world, and to never shrink her blackness or brilliance for any room. She reminded her to lean into joy, even when the world felt unfair. Paul sat quietly, tears running down his cheeks. The letter closed with, "Baby girl, when you feel alone out there, remember this. Your mama and daddy love you. You were never fatherless." Just father delayed. Samantha folded the letter and hugged it to her chest. Move-in day was chaos. Boxes, carts, roommates, parents in sneakers looking lost. Paul tried to stay cool, but he was clearly overwhelmed. Samantha laughed, watching him fumble with her mini-fridge. "Dad, you're sweating like you're moving in." He grunted. "Feels like it." After setting up her room, they took one last walk through campus. Paul held the letter Monique wrote. He had printed a copy and laminated it. They sat on a quiet bench under a tree. Paul cleared his throat. "I'm proud of you, Sam. Your mom would be too. I know I didn't always show up the way I should have, but I'm trying to make sure this goodbye doesn't feel like the others." She looked at him with glassy eyes. "This one's different, Dad. You showed up this time." They hugged, long, full, and final. When she pulled back, Paul noticed she had slipped the letter into his blazer pocket. "For when you miss us," she said. Back home, the silence was loud. Samantha's laughter wasn't echoing off the walls anymore. But Paul didn't let the quiet swallow him. He pulled out a list Monique had written on a sticky note years ago, titled "Stuff You Said You'd Do Someday." It had 6 items. 1. Take Sam to Grand Canyon. 2. Coach a Little League team. 3. Speak at a youth event. 5. Bake cookies from scratch. 6. Learn how to braid. He had done 4 of them. Now he did the rest. He joined the mentorship team at Monique's church, helping young boys who never had fathers. He practiced braiding on a mannequin head until his fingers stopped fumbling. When he showed Samantha over FaceTime, she laughed so hard she fell off her bed. "Mom would be shocked," she said. She'd say, "'Bout time," Paul replied. Volunteering became Paul's new rhythm. Every Saturday, he led a small group for teen boys. They talked about life, music, ambition, fear, and fatherhood. One day, a boy named Jordan asked, "Why do you care so much?" Paul looked at him and said, "Because someone once waited too long to care, and I swore I'd never make that mistake again." He also started a scholarship fund at Samantha's school, naming it after Monique. Every month, he and Samantha chose one student to support, a child from a single-parent household chasing big dreams. Paul was no longer just a CEO. He was a father with his sleeves rolled up. It was a quiet evening. Paul sat in his car parked in front of Monique's favorite lake. A soft breeze rustled the trees. He held the laminated letter Samantha gave him and looked out the window. "You were right, Mo. She's ready. She's everything you prayed for, and I'm better. Still not perfect, but better." His voice trembled, but he smiled. "I wish you could see her now. She laughs like you. thinks twice like you, and dances like no one's watching, like you did. He sat in the stillness for a while, then whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Even when I had given up on myself, a soft peace settled over him. Sometimes we don't get to fix the past, we only get to heal forward. And healing isn't a sprint. It's a decision we make every day. I missed the beginning, but I showed up for the middle, and I'll be there until the end. If there's someone you need to forgive, or someone you need to become, start today. Don't wait for a funeral to say what matters most. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who needs hope, forgiveness, or healing.